Hi everyone, my name is Rajni. I'm the Executive Director of Yoga Service Council, and today I have the supreme joy of talking to one of my very good friends, Shala, and he's getting shy, that's why he's taking a sip of his cup. Shala is a contemporary artist, and his primary work is in social impact. I've known him for a while, and to me, he's one of the most phenomenal people, and we're gonna get into resiliency, we're gonna get into Shala's life story, and what he's passionate about, his opinions and perspectives for everyone. So welcome, Shala.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
So question for you, aside from contemporary artists and your primary work being in social impact, what else do you want folks to know before who Shala is right now, before we get into your life story?
It's always, I don't know, as my awareness grows, it's always harder and harder to answer that question because it sounds cornier and cornier. You know, to say I'm a lover, I'm a father, I'm a black man. At the end of the day, I'm a space. I want to be a space. I want to be an opportunity for advancement. Right now, particularly for my people, but for humanity at large. So I hope that's not too, I don't know if that sounds pretentious, but that's really what I'm about. My work primarily focuses on social impact because I want to make an impact socially, and I want to do more than just paint pretty pictures. Nothing wrong with my contemporaries that do that. I've just always been told by my practical, foreign parents that you have to do more, more. So doing more is using my creativity to do things that are practical. Like like right now, my primary medium is solar arts. So I make solar murals and sculptures that generate electricity, as you know.
That's awesome. And remind me, where's one of your art pieces right now?
So my one that's the most lauded is the Bronzeville Solar Pyramid, and that's on 47th and King Drive in Chicago.
Awesome.
So I did it in the Bronzeville area because the area is primarily people of color, and I wanted to really start creating economic development down that particular strip, and it's working. So.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. It's very beautiful. Your solar art is really good. Okay. So Shala, I wanted to get a little bit, and you mentioned it earlier, foreign parents. So I want to talk a little bit about, how you grew up, and it's how you grew up, not just in the house, but how you grew up in the outside community. And let's just start there.
How I grew up in the house and how I grew up in the outside community. Yeah. So outside of the house or outside of meaning outside of the, okay. Where do I even, I'm born to Nigerian immigrants that came to this country for a better education. And the original plan, as I think most Nigerian immigrants, is to come here, get the education, go back home, then end up getting stuck, right? Because our country is not where it needs to be. And America is a pretty good country for opportunities. Mm-hmm. So they had sex, I came out, and I grew up in an environment where my parents were very practical, and I was the crazy creative kid, So I drew all the time, and I was always in search for more. I was very curious about just how things work. I used to look at water for like 15, 20 minutes and just wondering and marveling at how it worked, Yeah. So that led me to being outside more, getting in trouble more, but also creating a lot of different things that I never thought I could do. I ended up getting a record deal when I was in college with a rap group I had named Quelo. We toured a little bit. And in that, I realized that creativity was really powerful. So I went more into the design side when the group kind of didn't work out. And I started to just create art, and I got good at marketing and communications. And I really got good at using culture to make a difference, but I didn't know what to call it at the time. So I just thought it was marketing. So I was in the advertising marketing world for a while. I got sick of selling beer and wine and all this shit that I didn't really care about. And I started to start selling things I really cared about, which was things that could really make a social difference. Techniques that were being used to make people just consume more clothing, more sneakers, more alcohol, more fast food. You could use those same techniques and have people completely shift their mindset, especially around race, culture, politics, LGBTQ plus rights, all those kind of things. So I eventually shifted into that, and that's brought me to where I'm at now, an independent creative that uses art and culture to make a difference. So, I mean, that's the long short of it, you know, but that's pretty much what.
Awesome. So I'm going to go back a little bit to a statement that you made. And obviously, you know, my parents were immigrants as well. And being first generation here, there's a shit ton of things you got to grapple with, especially if there's some differences between how you want to live your lifestyle and how your parents want you to.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
On this thing talking to you with an Afro punk shirt on. Like, that's not it. But here we are.
Here we are. So when you mentioned that your parents were practical and all that, can you help us understand or help me understand a little bit more what that actually meant? I know you spoke about education, but what that actually meant, and was there any kind of either expectations or pushing or anything like that for you to go in a specific direction with your life versus not?
It was never blatant. My parents were pretty good about that. It was just always in the background, right? Like, you couldn't be a broke artist. So when I went to school for architecture, right? Mainly because I thought it was a good compromise between the art that I wanted to create and my parents' understanding of what makes a successful career. I hated architecture, didn't really, not into it. But I learned some things, and it steered me toward design, you know, which was good because that's what gave me my design chops. So I ended up graduating with a design degree, and it's great because it's what has me, is why I can design pyramids and why I can understand the practical impact of art, you know? Paul, does that ding bother you? How do I?
Let's turn the ding off. And we got window cleaners here too. So I'm going to pause the recording.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so what were we talking about? Parents.
Being a foreigner in America. Yeah.
Yeah, being a foreigner in America. Yes. So I'm going to take it one step further, or not one step further, but I'm going to introduce another topic here where when you're talking about like, it wasn't as blatant with your parents and then like, you need to do this, but more about not being like a broke artist, you know? I want to talk a little bit about like within that environment that was like outside of the family. Like, what communities did you end up living in? Were there any events or things that kind of stick out to you as you were growing up as a kid? Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
There are a lot of different events. It all depends on when you ask me. So right now, what pops out for me are mostly the events that reminded me that I was still a Black dude. My parents raised me as a Nigerian, proud Nigerian. And back then, they're different now, but back then they were very much like, we're not them, right? We're not those Black Americans, you know? So I was raised with that distinction by, oh, I'm Nigerian, you know? For better or for worse, right? And I'll tell you why when I tell you my journey. So I think the first time I realized that it didn't matter I was Nigerian, I was still Black, is when I got grabbed up by this white dude because we were running through this corridor and we were playing tag. And he thought I stole something. So he grabbed me and he sat me down. It's like, you thought you were gonna get away with stealing something? Now mind you, I have nothing in my hand, you know? We didn't have cell phones back when we were shorties, right? So I have nothing. And I said, I don't even have anything. He said, you tossed it. Like, I didn't talk, why would I do that? Like, I don't have anything, let me go. He said, I'm gonna call the police. And I was like, I'm gonna get in trouble with my parents. I'm just playing tag. I didn't know I could run through here, whatever. He called me a lot of different things, right? But he said, he walked off. He didn't call me a nigger in my face, right? But when he walked off, he was mumbling these niggas, but right? And it hit me like, oh, fuck, I'm Black as hell. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not Nigerian. He doesn't know the fucking difference. I'm a Black dude. And I think that shaped me from that point on. I don't think I started to really identify again with being Nigerian until I got to college. But from that point through high school, I was trying to be Black, whatever I identified as Black, African-American male. Now, the same racial stereotypes that impact white people impact us, but it's worse because we're the ones doing it, right? So Black to me was being strong, being probably overly aggressive, right? Being constantly in survival, putting myself in situations where I didn't need to be in to prove my manhood, all that kind of shit, you know? Everything the hip hop was shaping me to be. Now, I'm not gonna blame hip hop because hip hop initially for me was positive. The kind of shit I used to listen to was the Boogie Down Productions, Poor Righteous Teachers, Public Enemy, that kind of stuff. But as I started to mix with people more on the West Side, I started to become a different kind of person, thinking that I needed to be that in order to be deemed as Black. So that was a very polarizing time for me and my family because I didn't want to be anything they were talking about.
You didn't want to be anything that your parents were talking about, or on the West Side of Chicago, what they consider to be, what Black people consider to be Black at that time?
I didn't want to be what my parents were talking about. I thought they were racist, right? I thought that they understand that we're still seen as Black people here. I thought they were ignoring that. And over years, they saw that, right? My father went through his experiences. My mother went through enough of her experiences to realize that we're all Black when you're in America. What we have to our advantage is the culture, the foundation that a lot of my people, a lot of my friends here don't have. So I was able to tap into that discipline, that culture, to do a lot of things that they just didn't have naturally. And to be honest, I had a father in the house that beat my ass, you know, where a lot of my friends didn't have that. So it shaped the way I move and what I did, you know. I got in a fair share of trouble, but not like my friends did, you know. So around that time, yeah, I was in a search for identity, and being Nigerian was not as important. Although I do remember the parties we had, which I always looked at as an obligation, you know, having to cook, clean up all day, have people from all over the world yelling at me because they're in town and I'm not prostrating. We call it prostrate, where you, the way they would like me to, or I'm not saying the right uncle, auntie, the way I need to be saying it. So I had a sort of a resentment for my culture at that point, you know? So I remember a lot of situations where I wish I was who I am now then. I would have appreciated those situations way more, those events.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And so then let me get a little bit more into, first of all, how old were you when this identity was formulating, or the, you know, crisis or whatever you want to call it, the shift was happening? Do you remember?
I started transitioning to, I think I was, wow, I started seventh grade, 8th grade. By the time I got to high school, you know what? I had two poignant moments. When I got to high school, I was hanging out with mostly Latinos because I was from the North Side. So I was very used to multicultural. I was used to having a whole lot of different friends, Filipinos, Latinos, whatever. So when I got to high school, I was hanging out with Latino girls mostly. And it wasn't until I got my ass kicked by some guys from the West Side, you know what I mean, for getting into it with them in the lunchroom and them deeming me as weak because all I hung out around with was Latin girls. And I got my ass beat outside in front of a bunch of people. That is what completely reinforced that if I'm going to be a Black man, I have to be tough. I have to be all the stereotypes that Black men are in this country. And so that was the second phase and the crystallization of me, of my my nigga moments. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's when I really was like, okay, fuck this. You know, if I'm gonna be Black, I'm gonna be Black all the way.
Got it.
So those were the two like real big moments for me.
Got it. And you know, those are all the formative years as well. And the formative years make a big imprint as we move forward. And I, you know, like what I always say is you spend half your life, especially if you're first generation here, you know, from another culture. And that culture, you know, you're a person of color, you're Black and all that stuff. It's just like, you spend half your life learning how to be, and you spend the other half of your life learning how not to be.
Right. You know, and I had to really learn how to distinguish the difference between being a Black man and being a Black man and being a stereotypical nigger, right? And then what is it to be both and understand how to manage that in society? And then what is it to then incorporate my traditional Nigerian culture into that blend, which is what makes me who I am now. I'm proud of all of it, you know? I can constructively use the N-word. I don't know if we should be saying that here, I am what I am. But I can constructively use that word and the power that comes with it. But I can also constructively use the identity of Black man I could use the culture and the pride that comes with being Nigerian. And then I could use my awareness to be a space and not be any of that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's necessary because a lot of times we identify with something to our detriment. I don't care what it is. It could be white, it could be a reverend, it could be a basketball player, and it could be something as detrimental as being a nigga, right? But I think that our identification with these stereotypes that we did not create is what limits our perspective and causes the kind of issues we have.
I hear you. And I can understand that from my own experience as well, just my relative experience. And it's like when you choose to identify yourself so concretely and so like deeply ingrained in it, I think partially so that you have a sense of belonging somewhere.
Right.
That identity, that entrenchment in that identity and the validation from those in that community boxes you in.
Yeah.
And creates this.
Yep.
And so it sounds like that's obviously exactly what you went through.
Yeah.
So as we talk about this, I'm curious. So give me a little bit of an understanding, if you don't mind, about what is the Nigerian the culture that you grew up with. Like, what exactly is the Nigerian culture from an emotional and mental perspective and societal? And then I want to talk about the Nigerian culture that you have now embraced and made as part of who you are.
So it's not that different, right? The Nigerian culture teaches you to be productive, strong, and I would say intelligent about how you move. Those are key, right? And remembering that you represent your family and you represent a certain level of pride in being someone of, I would say, Yoruba culture, right? We also have Hausa, we have Igbo, we have other cultures. So I'm speaking primarily for Yoruba people, Yoruba sect of Nigerians. Those are also the people that send you the mail, the spam emails. That's our people. But anyway, so what I took from them, what's ingrained in me is discipline and audacity, right? And I say audacity because it's similar to something of white privilege. I say it's like black privilege, where no one is allowed to look down on you, or you are not allowed to suppress your light for somebody else, right? So where that has served me is I've rarely had the notion that white people are better than I am. So I don't suffer from that. I may suffer from that insecurity around wealth, which they tend to have as their, ace of spade, you know what I mean? But I've never thought that fair skin is better than me as a Nigerian or as a black person. So that's great. And I'm not gonna say that I don't admire European design and all those cool things that they do, but I've never thought that we are not capable of that, nor have I ever been ignorant to the fact that a lot of that was stolen from our culture, or let's say inspired by our culture. So that's the Nigeria component that's been good for me. The African-American component is being more expressive, being less conservative, not being afraid to make mistakes, being more emotive, and understanding my place in the world, right? As an African-American in this country, we have to engage with so many different kind of people, right? When you're a Nigerian, you do, but you have to do it because you happen to be black, right? It's not that you have to do it because Nigeria is Nigeria. You can be in Nigeria. But when you come here and you engage with so many people, you are engaging them as a black man. Until they hear you and they talk to you, for the most part, you're engaging them as a black man. That gives birth to a lot of creative ways of survival. And I think that that's given a lot of birth to my creativity, my ability to talk to a lot of different people, because you can relate, right? We have to learn how to, what do we call that shit? Code switch. We got to learn how to code switch and talk to as many different people as possible, right? Because we have to blend, but we still have to keep our identity intact while we do that. That's not easy. You know what I mean? So I think that's what's made me who I am today. And the last thing is the curiosity that that's created. Because I'm the child of immigrants, I have a natural curiosity. then I'm put into a position where I better have that curiosity because I need it for survival. You know, I need to be hyper aware of what this dude is on when he's walking down the street. You know what I mean? Or is this white woman going to call the police on me? You know what I'm saying? I have to be hyper vigilant of how people move. And so that has brought me to awareness, because I don't think that I would have taken the steps toward awareness if I wasn't curious about things in general. That's what brought me to yoga. That's what brought me to self-development work. All this shit is my curiosity.
I like that term that you use, that I think every person of color, especially, and those in the community of the LGBTQ and everything, I feel like the term that you use, creative ways to survive, taking so much data in on any given day that addresses things like color, age, event, community you're tapping into, the way you're talking, what you're talking, taking all of that data from different places and spaces, and ingraining it into, like you said, you know, and understanding how to move, you know. I think that's such a critical point of conversation, because the creative ways of survival, you know, I don't think a lot of folks who, well, you know, I think that's really special, I think. And when I say special, I'm talking about like all of us who have had to look at all those data points and be like, okay, these are the ways that I know I can be safe in the environment. The safety issue is huge. And then obviously when you're a Black man or you're a woman walking down the street, I mean, there's so many things to look at in terms of safety. So when you use that term, creative ways of survival, looking at it from the safety arena, when does that shift move into thriving versus surviving?
I'm learning that now. I think the shift moves into thriving when you start to practice those things in areas that have the resources. So what I'm dealing with now is that I've always had friends from all walks of life, but I've always kept my same, is ecology of income a term? I don't know. So the people that have been around me have always been somewhat middle class or poor, shit, you know? And it's always been harder to accomplish the things I want to accomplish because my vision is always big. As I've made friends that are wealthier and have more resources, I've been able to accomplish those things that I can accomplish in 3 years, I can accomplish in a conversation. So what I've learned is that people in that position have not had to practice the lifestyle that we have to practice as people of color that are in survival. They don't know how to express themselves with multiple people or different types of people. They don't know how to tap into a side of them that will fix something with the limited resources you have. They just go buy something else. You know what I mean? And they value that. And you can apply that to everything from entertainment to building solar pyramids, you know what I mean? To solving financial concerns. It's amazing. So I have been using something that I think is one of our most valuable resources, which is culture, to really, culture in exchange for money, to really start creating wealth. And I'm talking generational wealth. The other advantage is when you mix with people who have resources, they teach you how to get those resources. And they connect you with other people that have resources who then teach you how to get more resources. So that's what I'm learning right now, is that we need to take our product, our income generating talents to where the resources are and stop exchanging it within ourselves, because if we are to create wealth, we have to do that in exchange for money.
Yes. And so what I hear you say is, and I vibe with that, because, you know, it opens up the horizon a little bit more, engaging outside of the community in the places where the wealth resources may be. And if you're in the community, using, you know, looking at those resources as well, obviously. So I'm going to shift a little, not shift a little bit, because this is going to blend into the survival versus thrival component here a bit. You know, we're talking about like resiliency, right? And, you know, when you are first generation of immigrant parents, I'm going to go back to that for a bit. When you are first generation of immigrant parents, you know, you develop that resiliency, I think, pretty freaking fast, because right from the beginning, there is an outside world, outside the house and inside the house, that is completely at odds or mostly at odds. And you are contending with who you are at a very, very early freaking age. And I think the experience of that is what begins the process of resiliency. And I think there's an advantage, you know, of being of immigrant parents. There's an advantage
very much so.
yeah,
Especially immigrant of color. Because I have immigrant parents I have immigrant friends that are white that don't have the advantages I have because they don't have to deal with race the way I do. Race is a real big fucking deal in this country. It really is. You know what I mean? How many people ask you if you're Puerto Rican, Mexican, all types of other, they don't even touch South Asian. What? Because they don't even have to, because they don't have to deal with that because they happen to be white. So they don't have any reason to have to even figure out what you are. And there's a level of privilege that allows them to ask you anything without even dealing with what they say may impact you. You know what I mean? We don't have that choice.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't have that choice with ourselves. We don't have that choice with them. We don't have that choice with other people that even look like us. We don't have that, you know? So I have to watch what I say with Nigerians, Black people, Latinos, white people from since I was 6. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, it gives us a tremendous advantage, you know? It really does. I just wish our people knew that. I think it takes too long for us to get that. We use it for survival, but we don't use it to thrive, because we don't get that it's a superpower. We think it's just something you have to do. It's like breathing to us.
You know, and I think a part of this component, which again, you know, it goes back to the whole of how such a young age you develop that resiliency in so many different factors. It has to do with the fact that I had that experience, you had the experience where the main word is struggle.
Yeah.
That's it.
Struggle. Yep.
And by the time you get to the point of like, you know what, shit, I don't have to struggle anymore. I can choose, I can pick, I can decide, I can integrate what I want. There's such a vast arena of experiences that have occurred. A lot with your accent, if there's an accent, a lot with your color, a lot with where you chose and how you chose to show up.
Yeah.
So that resiliency, I think, is really strong in first generation people of color, for sure.
Yeah, it really is. But I think this is our time. I think. Are we the first? I don't know. Are we the first generation because the immigration of people came, maybe that started what, 60 years ago for the first time? There was such a wide array of different people from different countries entering America. Had that happened before? Because before that, it was mostly people they choose to call white, Polish, Italian, etc. But the first generation, our parents, that was the first generation of people from multiple countries that are of color coming into this country, right?
There was a huge influx with our parents' generation. Prior, the generation before them had some, but ours was just really full force. I mean, it was the thing. Even when I was growing up, or not growing up, but even like our parents' generation, I think, did the push for that huge influx in terms of that level and volume of immigrants and people of color coming into the country in that way. And I think that whole kind of continued all the way to when I was in college. Like, it was a big deal. Like, you wanted to come to the States to study, you know, come for a master's program, you wanted to be here. I think that's shifting a little bit now, but up until my college years, you know, which I'm not going to say how long ago that was. There was a lot of that going on. So yeah, continue with your thought of that, you know.
So we are the first we're the first generation of the first generation. I keep getting stuck in that. So it's making sense that America is shifting the way it's shifting because we are coming into our own, and we are coming to a place where we have more means to do things, and we're in more influential positions, and we have younger brothers and sisters that are coming up, and we have the understanding that we have a certain level of savviness and power, because we don't look at as America as the world. We look at the world as the world. And coming up at a time where things are more global, we are more useful in multiple ways. Especially Nigerian Americans, we are thriving right now, you know. And because we're the first generation, we had the impact of being Black. So we're not thriving just as Nigerian Americans. We are also thriving as Black people who identify as Black people. And I think that's great because it's raising the level for people of color that are darker. You know what I'm saying? I think that first generation people of color are having a tremendous impact in this country, but I don't know if it's being celebrated yet. But I think it's coming.
Yeah, and that takes us into the Black Lives Matter movement, which, you know, started back in 2012. You know, with this particular movement, the origination was in 2012 with Trayvon Martin's death, murder. And I think, you know, as we're settling into this place and space where all of the recent deaths that have been happening, it's kind of like, well, let's talk about that. Like, how do you, what is your take on it? And when I take on it, like where's your heart with this in the beginning when it all just kind of happened? And then where's your heart now? Like the call to action that you feel is critical. Where's Shala in all this?
So I've been a social justice type person since maybe 8th grade when I was dealing with identity. Since the first time I got impacted and I got that I'm actually a Black man, I started listening to hip hop that was more about the civil rights movement and struggle. And I was fascinated with Malcolm X and all those different things. So I've been doing this kind of work, protest work, advancement for my people, work around advancement for my people forever. So when at first, you mean George Floyd at this point, or George? Because during the Trayvon Martin thing, I was jaded. When George Floyd happened, I thought it was fascinating that it was like, I can't breathe all over again. The exact same fucking statement, you know what I mean? But I was jaded, right? When it started to pick up, I started getting more and more fascinated. Still jaded, but like, wait, this is different. You know what I mean? Wait, there are a lot of white people outside. You know what I'm saying? Wait, police are running cars into white people. Wait, this is different. And then the emotional roller coaster happened. Because then I started going up and down. I went from anger to frustration to giddiness to astonishment to happiness. I think I've gone through all of it. I've been in a lot of different spaces because there's a part of me that says, now we're doing something. How many of us had to fucking die before we got here? Or now you're listening because the white kids are saying some shit, you know? But right now I'm in a peaceful place because I understand that it is what it is. And I understand that we have just as much to play. We have just as much ownership as to why we're here as even if it's just white kids being on the front lines, because we inspired that. One of our biggest products is cultural influence. And years of revolution music through reggae, music through hip hop culture, your favorite basketball player, your favorite football player, your favorite doctor, your uncle, niece, your best friend, your best friend's cousin. Somebody has some color in them. You know what I mean? So no longer are you using that, looking at like, oh, that's some hood dude from some neighborhood that I would never go to. Shit, that looks like my teacher. That looks like my best friend's father. You know what I mean? That looks like my sister or my stepsister. So that looks like my favorite rapper. So I'm proud of us in that we are now using our biggest commodity, arguably our biggest commodity, which is cultural influence, to save our own lives. And I think that that's very powerful. And I think that I'm very proud to be a person of color right now, to have people fighting for us. There was some sense of pride that I felt when we were fighting for ourselves, but now I'm humble enough to know that maybe we're not supposed to do that. Maybe we are supposed to inspire those who can actually fight for us and bring the win, because we're always going to lead it anyway, in one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, this particular movement, Black Lives Matter movement, you know, I agree. I've seen people outside of the Black community, you know, really pushing doing, most importantly. That's the key thing, to doing, because anybody can put a social media post up, anybody can, you know, write a letter, sign a petition, but they're doing shit now.
Yeah.
And it's, whether it's sitting outside for a protest, whether it's organizing them, whether it's considering yourself a helper, whether it's linking and looking at, you know, changing the funding around where funding is going and putting them more into Black communities, because we talked about it earlier, you know, resources.
Resources. It's about economics and policy right now. And I'm glad that the conversation is centered around what's important: economics and policy. Give us the money you owe because we helped build the country, and you took money away and gave it to other people. And then policy that enforces all of that systematic reinforces all of that systematic racism, you know? And I'm glad that we are now savvy enough to address those and not just say, oh, we want those 4 cops locked up, thank you, good night. You know what I mean? We know that it's bigger than that. And I'm very, very proud of that. I've been waiting for that forever, you know? So I'm glad that that's the conversation, and I'm glad that that's being led by not just white kids and not just Black kids, but all of us, you know? And I think America finally gets that this poison infects the whole country, one way or the other. We might just be the where they test it, but it eventually bleeds across the country, right? We had crack, right? Poor white people have opioids, right? But they usually test those things on the poorest of people in this country, and they see how they can roll it out into the rest. And then eventually it affects even the middle class and then the upper middle class. So I think we're savvy enough to get that now.
I like that. And I think, you know, one thing that I've been starting to notice with our movement this year is the fact that people from other countries are protesting. They've seen this. I think, you know, it's very interesting. Like countries like Korea and stuff like that. I've seen there was like a protest in India about Black Lives Matter movement. And it's like, wow. Because I think, you know, one thing that's associated with this is, you know, when you, whole thing of being first generation is the element of within your own culture, you see
the same thing.
You see the same shit. Like it's within the culture, it's there, you know, but that it doesn't take away from how the external societies and communities react to people of color, to Black people, Indigenous, and, you know, LGBTQ. It's like, we're very familiar with this paradigm of discrimination and systemic racism that exists within our own culture.
Yes.
And now starting to see how this movement is going, you know, a little bit worldwide with some of these protests, that's refreshing and it's different. And it gives you a sense of like, oh shit, something is actually getting done now.
Yeah, because we're all experiencing the same thing all over the world, you know? There's the same thing happens with darker Indians, no? I know the same thing happens with darker Latinos, you know, Filipinos have it in the Asian community. What is it, you know? And that there's a toll on your mental health when you think that your skin tone determines how valuable you are. You know, we see this all the time. And that's the greatest tragedy to me, because that's what has plagued white people up to this point, is that we don't know our value. So that we perpetuate the stereotypes because we think that's what we are.
Yeah, and I remember just growing up in the Bollywood industry, which is the largest movie industry that we have in the world. And, you know, decades ago, there was a woman that was an actress. Her name was bySha Basu, and she was tan. How the hell did we get an Indian in the Bollywood industry that was tan? That was big shit. That was about like 20 years ago or something like that.
Wow.
So yeah, just within, and, you know, we can go into all the different details of the skin whitening creams and all sorts of shit associated with that. Like that stuff is there, and there's such a deeper thread to that because, you know, India was colonized, you know. That was
yeah. I think they were, look, I know it's by design, and I don't know if we were in their position we wouldn't do the same thing. I think human beings are human beings. It just doesn't work for us, and we can't allow it to continue to work, you know. But I think that I have a strong belief that there were a group of people who were fair-skinned that thought their survival was threatened and said that we have to gather all the people of fair skin and come together as this thing called white people, right? And then we have to come up with systematic ways to have all of the people who are the majority of the world think that they are less than us in order to ensure our survival. And right now, at least in America, their survival is very much threatened because they are diminishing in population. They're going through a lot economically, and we are rising up. So the same things you are seeing, maybe when they first created these systems, are now having to either reinvent themselves or fight for survival. And you can see that with our president, you know? So as a person who can look above all of this, I don't blame them, but you're not gonna kill me and my people. So it is what it is, you know what I mean? But that's a story for another conversation. That's a whole nother conversation.
Another interview, yeah. So, okay, and then I'm just gonna bring it back a little bit to the whole, we've already talked about the resiliency that developed, the strength that you have to develop, the mindset capacity that develops growing up, you know, when you're in the Black community and different cultures, et cetera. So you mentioned it earlier, when the arena of, like, you know, because you're a Lululemon ambassador, you know, so you're in this world in a very pronounced way, you know. And I think I remember when I first heard that you were a Lululemon ambassador, I was like, yeah, that's pretty damn good. I don't see a lot of people of color in that area. You know, this is all brought up into the sphere, you know, with this current climate of, like, where are the Black yoga teachers? Where are the Black meditation teachers? Where are they? How come they're not? And now I see, like, action being taken where they're being more promoted now. There's more stuff and more resources coming their way, which is obviously long overdue. So as you look at kind of how you stepped into this world of yoga, meditation, mindfulness, whatever spiritual practice you may have, how do you feel they impacted your baseline of resiliency that you already had? How did that feel?
So what it's teaching me now is the importance of emotions and emoting and allowing emotions to move through me. Because of, and this is my experience as a Nigerian-American, because of the way our culture is set up for survival and being strong, I wasn't taught the importance of emotion and emoting. I was taught to suppress it. And then my curiosity brought me to tools that would allow me to intellectually suppress it without knowing that I'm suppressing it. I used a lot of landmark tools that would have me be the bigger person or the more progressive person to invalidate the way I felt, because I felt that being angry in this moment is not productive, tuck it away. Being sad in this moment is not productive, tuck it away. Not only for survival, but for the greater good. What yoga, and credit to Lululemon for putting me in situations where I was able to really discover this, has been teaching me is that my emotions and my feelings are valid. Being responsible for them does not mean suppressing them. It actually means letting them go through me in a responsible way, right? And in the most effective way, and having the ability to response able, right? Having the ability to respond to how my emotions are impacting somebody is not about, how do I put this? It's not about being the bigger person. It's about accepting my humanity and accepting their humanity and having a conversation that allows them to get that they're having an impact on me in a way that may have me have to walk away and come back and talk to them a different way, you know? So before I'd get angry, I'd suppress it, be really calm, and let that person kind of win the argument and just be the bigger person. Now, I will let them know that I'm frustrated, I might swing on them, and I walk off. Channel it somewhere else, come back and complete the conversation in a way that that person and I are understood. That's responsibility. And that's what yoga is teaching me, because I've had to release a lot of pain through yoga because it's been trapped in my body for years. And I'm really dealing with it in a really major way. I'm talking like pains in my neck, in my arm, blood clots in my lungs, just things that I never thought I would have to go through because I suppressed emotions.
Got it. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I think that, you know, as we continue the conversation with not just, you know, what's needed for systematic change in institutions like education, public health, hiring discrimination, and we continue the conversations of, you know, giving funds back and redistribution of current funds into the communities that need them, you know, this element of resiliency and this element of that continued development of strength. I don't think that ever stops. I think development of strength just keeps going. You know, the more that you choose not to be sheltered. But also the practices of yoga and everything, just like you talked about, there's an embodied way to associate with the outside world. There's a way to work with these emotions in a way that doesn't destroy you and doesn't take away from your ability to impact and to be strong and show up for your community, your family, your people, your kids. So.
Yeah. And I think it's necessary that it start to infiltrate our standard practices, schools, police departments, construction workers, lawyers. I think it has to be a necessary part of our culture because we continue to forget that we're human beings for some reason. We continue to forget that we are impacted by these things on a mental level. Mental health is more popular than ever, but I still think that it's pushed to the side. Like, okay, we'll get to it, you know, and it leads to a lot of the violence we're seeing.
Yeah, and I would even, you know, I would add on to that the mental health component of it in Black communities, people of color, all of the different folks is, if it's not looked down upon, because in some cultures and some communities it's looked down upon, like, what are you talking about mental health? You should be strong. Like, what the hell is this stuff?
Exactly.
You know? So if we're lucky and there's that particular variable doesn't play a role in our lives where it's not looked down upon, then it becomes about the resources of those people of color and Black communities that are the therapists, that are the mental health specialists, because they will approach this from a different lens because they are there in that community, and finding them is the key.
Exactly. And they're not enough. So it's a great opportunity. My therapist, she happens to be a white woman, and she's constantly checking to see if she's effective with me because she believes in this thing called the colonization of therapy, where therapy, much like yoga, is the word co-opted and redesigned to fit a white narrative or way of doing things. And it doesn't necessarily work for people of color. And it doesn't necessarily honor all of the best practices of the original intention of those therapeutic practices. So it's important now that we start to really identify where we've taken white culture and adopted it in a way that only furthers the suppression that we experience, even more insidiously because it's mental and emotional. So it's not even outward. So it's almost like you're swinging at ghosts, right? Because there's no real enemy, because everybody's complicit in spreading the inner suppression of white culture. And white culture doesn't mean any harm. Again, I think it was created for survival, but it no longer serves any of us, not even white people. And it's important to abolish it, at least in its current form. Love that.
Yep, I totally agree. All right, Shala, well, this was a pleasure, as always. I wish I could hug you. Like, you know, it's okay, we'll get to there. Thank you so much for sharing everything. And we'll have places and spaces where people can connect with you personally. I know that your existence in my life has been a very critical support structure. Just in understanding and just talking and having that freedom of speech and not having to think twice.
Yeah.
And being able to relate to one another. That's really huge. That's really huge. So I appreciate the shit out of you.
Thank you. I love you. I love you, especially especially in the way you've helped me through this current journey, because you know what I've been going through emotionally and physically, and just having to relearn how to emote. like amazing. I never thought I'd be at an age where I have to learn how to cry.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I appreciate that.
I'm learning because it's coming, so it's good.
Yay, good. Cry. I love it. I love it. Shala's crying. That's like, yes, breakthrough. I love you.
I love you too. Thank you for this opportunity.
There will be more.